Well, it's a great day today, and it's a little surreal for my wife and I just because, it's one thing to build a building. It's another thing to see an expansion come, and just God is moving here at Freedom House Church. Isn't it exciting? And I'll make fun of this, but, we are in the middle of our Kingdom Builders weekend, and I seriously mean this, that there are a lot of cheaper churches to go to, and I think it's great that people like you have decided to use your faith and use your finances because that building wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. And so thank you so much for all that you do, all your faithfulness, all your prayers, the leadership that is here, the volunteers that are here. That's what makes vision come to pass. And I remember back in September of July of 2002, I remember sitting in our little townhouse living room praying. There was 4 of us that would gather together and pray for you and pray for this church. And to see what God has done in the last 13 years is pretty amazing. But we aren't finished yet, okay? I just want to let you know that there's a lot more to do and a lot more people to reach with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, matter of fact, on December the 24th, make sure you set your calendars. That's a pretty big day. That's the day before Christmas. That's when all the guys go shopping and all the husbands go shopping. It's the best day in the world. There are more men in the shopping malls on December 24th than any day of the entire year. I promise you. I promise you. And so that's a great day. But we also have our Christmas Eve services at 4, 5:30, and 7. So make sure you mark your calendar. Matter of fact, you can get your phone out right now and just tweet that, Instagram it, just take a selfie and just say, I'm coming to Christmas Eve service, and just hashtag Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas, Merry Queen City Christmas is what we're doing. And so we're doing a lot of advertising around the community, but invite your friends, bring a bringer, be a bringer, and invite them. We're going to have snow. Snow's coming. Snow tubing. You'll be able to tube in the snow, no matter, even if it's 85 degrees on Christmas Eve, we will still have snow. It will work, I promise you. So I can't believe the weather that we're having. So anyway, we're in a series called Kaleidoscope, and we're talking about how God can take broken things, and when he infuses the light of his life, the life of Jesus, that he can take those things and make a beautiful picture out of them. And last week, we talked about the story of Jacob. And today, I want to talk about God encounters. I want to talk about God encounters. That basically when there is nothing more dramatically changing in our life than when we have an encounter with God. So I love about church. Church is not just a meeting that we attend every week, because the truth of the matter is there are people here that are sitting in this room today that have had the worst week of their entire lives. I mean, this week has been terrible. Last night was horrible. Friday was bad. There are people in this room that had the best week of their lives. I mean, they got a promotion. They found out that they were pregnant again. They found out that they finally met the right person, whatever that may look like. And there are people here that they couldn't imagine life without God. Their whole life has, been with God. But there are also people who couldn't imagine even believing in God. And the greatest thing about that is when God encounters you, all of us have the same opportunity to receive a word from him, no matter where you are. Whether it's the best, the worst, whether you believe or maybe you're a little skeptical, it really doesn't make any difference, because when God shows up in our world, everything changes. The Bible says this in Psalms chapter 34, verse 18. It says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. So here's the great thing. If you have any, which is all of us, all of humanity, if any of us have any type of brokenness, God is right there all the time. I love what the Message paraphrase says. It says that if your heart is broken, you will find God right there. This is a quote by C.S. Lewis, and I don't know what particular book it's in, but it says this. It says, God whispers to us in our pleasures. He speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts to us in our pain. Sometimes, if we're honest, we have to go through some pain in order to hear God's voice. Sometimes that's the greatest volume of God's voice is in the midst of our greatest trials. I dare say that God would like it the other way as well, like even when we're having our greatest successes. Even every day, I believe God really wants to talk to us and spend time with us. And today can be one of those days where you encounter God. Have you ever met somebody? Maybe you. I know that we all bump into people all the time. Maybe you met an old friend. You bumped into somebody walking down the street just out of the blue. I don't know if you ever. My wife and I have been in airports many times, and we go eat somewhere, and then all of a sudden, a friend of ours that lives in another city sits down and meets with us, or happens to be in the same airport at the same time, and it's amazing what happens. I mean, sometimes we meet people, bump into people, old friends that we really don't want to meet, right? It kind of happenstance, and we run into an old high school friend, or maybe your spouse runs in with you to one of their old flames. You ever had that happen before? My wife made me eat lunch with one of her old flames. Forced me to have dinner. It was actually dinner with one of her old boyfriends that happened to be in town. It was a very interesting dinner. We had fun, you know. Both of us kind of stuck our chest out a little bit more than the other, and actually it was a pretty interesting conversation. One of the things that I want to talk about in regards to God encounters is sometimes we have no idea what's going to happen on the other side of that encounter. Matter of fact, if you would have told me that when I met my wife-to-be, what was going to happen on the other side of it, I don't know if I would have handled it the same. I was in a fraternity, okay, at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, go Rams, in Richmond, Virginia. I was in a fraternity, and God was not even on my radar. Girls were on my radar. God was not on my radar. And this was my BC days. Let me make that very clear. Before Christ days, I was not a Christian, and I was a bit intoxicated at this particular party. And matter of fact, it was called our jungle party, and I was dressed like a tree. Okay, I had a hat on, and I had vines coming down, you know, all around me. The rest I'll leave to your imagination, because if I were to tell you the real story, you probably would leave the church right now. So I'm sitting there in this fraternity party, and this beautiful blonde, you know, 90s hair comes in. I'm talking full-on 2 cans of spray hair, okay? She's got all her posse with her. All the girls are with her, and she walks in. I say out of my mouth, a bit intoxicated, not prophetic, more pathetic, and I said, I'm going to marry that girl. True story. I'm sitting there talking to my fraternity brothers, and I said, I'm going to marry that girl right there. And I pointed at Penny, and I used the best line I had, okay? I brought all the stops, and I walked up to her, and I said, can you hold my beer? That was my line. Okay, don't be shouting me down, because it worked. Okay, just saying. I know you thought it was weak, but it worked. Now here's my point. My point in saying this is that had you told me that I would be standing on this platform today, back then, had you told me that I would have had 3 wonderful children, one of which is in a Bible college, 2 of them are serving God. If you would have told me that I was going to travel all over the world, if you would have told me that I would meet the people that I was going to meet with, I would have the experiences that I was going to have, the ups, the downs, the goods, the bads, all of that. If you would have told me all of that before I had that encounter, I would have said you were crazy. And I probably would have gone into that moment differently had you had spelled everything out. See, I believe God was in the middle of that fraternity house. I believe it. I believe God can show up anywhere that He needs to get your attention. And today I want to talk about an encounter, one of my favorite encounters in the Bible, between a woman and God. Because see, when you encounter God, when you have a true encounter with God, not a close encounter, but a real face-to-face meeting with Almighty God, He will catapult you forward always. I mean, think about the people in the Bible before I get to this story. It's in John chapter 4, by the way, if you want to turn there. Think about the people in the Bible that had encounters with God. I mean, think about Noah. He had an encounter with God, and he built a boat, and it never rained. And he saved his entire family. Think about guys like Abraham. Abraham had an encounter with God, and he moved to a different nation. Moses had an encounter with God, and he led 3 million complainers out of Egypt into the promised land. I mean, just think about Joshua. He had an encounter with God, and he attacked a formidable enemy with a shout. Hey! And the walls came down. I mean, if you think about people like Gideon, Gideon had an encounter with God, and he attacked an army with 300 people, 300 against an army of thousands. See, when you have an encounter with God, you are invincible when it comes to the enemy. When you have an encounter with God, everything about your life changes. David had an encounter with God, and he killed a 9-foot giant with a pebble, with a rock. 9-foot giant. Took the giant's sword from him and cut his head off. Nehemiah had an encounter with God, and he built a wall in a city he had never visited but had a passion for. Peter had an encounter with God, and he preached the greatest message that was ever recorded, and 3,000 people were saved. Esther encountered God, and she saved a nation. Elijah encountered God, and he did miraculous works. John encountered God, and he wrote the book of Revelation. When you have an encounter with God, everything about your life changes. I believe today is the day for your encounter with God. He's close to the brokenhearted. John chapter 4 is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. I love it because we don't even know the girl's name. We don't know anything about her. And in John 4, it says this. It says, therefore, when the Lord, Jesus, knew that the Pharisees had heard, this is verse 1, that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. Everybody say he needed to. Say it again. Say he needed to. Look at your neighbor. Say he needed to go. He needed to go through Samaria, so he came to a city of Samaria named Sychar, which means drunkard, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came. A woman. We don't know her name. Was her name Mary? Was her name Julie? Was it Deborah? We don't know who she is. It just says a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. I want to just give you a couple thoughts about how Jesus encounters our brokenness. First of all, Jesus pursues our brokenness. The title of this message is A Walk to the Well. Let me give you the picture of what's going on in this story. It's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and Jesus is tired. He's weary. He's thirsty. His disciples had gone to Chick-fil-A in the city to get him a couple, Chick-fil-A sandwiches, because disciples always go to Chick-fil-A because it's the Christian company. And so they don't go to McDonald's or any Taco Hades. They don't go to any of that stuff. So, did I just say Taco Hades? Okay. Taco Bell. Sorry for those of you that work there. And Jesus is sitting by this well. He's just chilling. And most people would think that he's there just because most of the encounters, most of the miracles that happened with God were interruptions of his day. However, this one was not an interruption. This was planned. This was particular. This was not spontaneous. This was in the making before the foundation of the earth. I believe this had been set. Jacob had built this well for his son Joseph. Joseph purchased the land for this moment, probably for this moment alone. Yeah, a lot of people came to the well. A lot of people spent time at the well because honestly, in the morning and in the evening is when women came to draw water from the well for their family. So why in the world is this woman coming at 12 noon? You know why? Because she's broken. And see, all of us have our own personal walks to the well, meaning that we don't really want to talk about our brokenness. We don't really want to deal with our brokenness. And so we are going to many times provide a place for ourselves where we don't need to deal with our brokenness. And so instead of coming in the morning where everybody's going to point the finger at this woman, because you'll find out in the future that she's been with a few men. She's not the most positive person in the world. She's not the most, social person in the world. She doesn't want to be ridiculed anymore. She's tired of the whispers and the talks and the jabber because, let's just be honest. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes women can be just a little catty. Not you. Y'all are all great and angelic, but I'm just saying about the other people, the 10:30 and the 12 o'clock service. Be a little catty. She's tired of the whispers. Who's she with this week? What's going on in her life now? Look at her. Look at that girl. Here she comes again. I can't believe she's coming to this well. I can't believe that she's going to actually come here. I mean, I know her history. I know what she's been through. She doesn't want to hear that stuff. And see, that's what we feel like sometimes. Sometimes we feel, I don't want to hear about that stuff, man. I don't want to talk about my past. I don't want to deal. I want to just cover it up. I want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. So I'm just going to walk to the well when nobody's going to be there. However, today was different. Today's different because God in his deity, God in his amazing ability to orchestrate the universe has at this moment placed himself in the pathway of this woman. So she walks up to the well thinking that she's just going to do her business, and there's Jesus. A man. You'll find out later, pretty much a man has been her problem. And now a man is sitting there and he goes, give me a drink. See, Jesus knows what you're going through. And he will plant people and he will plant circumstances to direct you to the well. He will put you on the right path. You think, no, it's just by accident. I just came because somebody promised me a Starbucks coffee. No, you're here because today was the time of your encounter with God. My walk to the well happened to be I was dressed like a tree. And I met a cute little blonde girl. And my life completely changed from that point forward. God arrested me in that moment. Because he knew the call on my life. He knew the call on my family. He knew this church would not be in existence if it wasn't for, can you hold my beer? I'm just saying. That's spiritual. No, I'm just kidding. He needed to go through Samaria. God shows up at the right time every time. His timing is impeccable. He's always on time. Look at your neighbor and say, he's always on time. Because he pursues our brokenness. Romans 5 verse 6. Listen to this verse. When we were utterly helpless, when we were utterly broken, when we were broken as a world, humanity, humans were broken, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. I love Ephesians 1 because it says this in verse 10, and this is the plan. At the right time, he will bring everything together. At the right time. At the right time. Today is your time. You know what else Jesus does in dealing with our brokenness is he breaks down any barriers. He will scale any wall. You can't put a wall out there big enough that Jesus won't try to scale. He won't come over. He will bust it down. He will he will fill in the moat that you've got alligators in. He will figure out what is going to, and he will bust out. Because this woman, she throws up all kinds of walls at him. You know why? Because when we are broken, we have adjusted so much to our brokenness that we cover it, we surround it, and we want to protect it. Like, if I get healed, what's going to happen? Like, how's my life going to change? What's going on? And so we have built a crutch, an adjusted life. It's a part of our DNA. We have felt so comfortable with the dysfunction of our past, we've allowed it to infiltrate our future. And so she builds up all these kinds of walls. She says, after Jesus says, can I have a drink of water? The woman said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? So, because see, Jesus, as a Jew, did not have connections with Samaritans. They were two very tense nations against each other. The Samaritans had intermarried with the Babylonian invasion back and before Christ, and the Jews said, we can't have connection with them. The Samaritans would not even come to Jerusalem to worship. They had created their own place of worship. There was no connection, but Jesus says, no, I'm going to break down that wall. First of all, I'm going to deal with any racial tension. I'm going to deal with any cultural walls, and I'm going to drop it down. Because it's so easy to bring our dysfunctional culture right into our now, even when it comes to God. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to deal with that. You know what else she does? He says to her, after he says, give me a drink. And she says, no, you're not even supposed to talk to me, for Jews have no dealings. Jesus says to her in class, if you knew the gift of God, if you really knew what was going on right now, you'd probably change what's happening. You would probably open the door a lot wider than the little kind of slit with your foot kind of holding back the door, making sure that you're not going to you wouldn't just look through the peephole to see who's at the door. If you knew the gift of God and who it is, verse 10, who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. I love what she says next, because she throws up an emotional wall. Not only a physical wall, but an emotional wall. And she says to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with. You didn't even bring any utensils to get water out of the well. And just so you know, this well is deep. In other words, I got some problems. This is deep. Like, you're going to really have to get down. Do you really want to go there, brother? Do you really want to talk about this? This well is deep. And then she goes on to throw out a spiritual wall at him. She says, to God, okay? To God. She says, our fathers worshipped on this mountain. And you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. And this is where Jesus, in his amazing, I just love how in these conversations. And by the way, if you were to read this from verse 4 all the way through the end of this story, it was about a 6 or 7 minute conversation. And her life completely changed. I've done it. I've timed it, how long it took for me to read it. 6 or 7 minutes, tops, even if there were some long pauses in there. That just tells you it doesn't take much time for somebody's life to change when you have an encounter with God. In a moment, in a second, just boom, just like that, everything changes. And Jesus he basically goes right at Jesus said to her in verse 21, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. In other words, you haven't come into a relationship with God. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. Everybody say spirit and truth. Now this is important when it comes to the encounter, okay? Because when we encounter God, listen, he's going to go right to the issue. He's going to deal with the issue. He's going to go right at the heart of the matter. And the only way, what Jesus is doing, he's speaking the language of intimacy with this woman who doesn't like intimacy. And when we feel broken, we don't want that. We typically shy away from it because it's way more easy to be superficial. A lot more work, but way easier to do that. So he says, listen, you don't really understand intimacy. You don't understand worship. God's looking for those that will worship in spirit. Greek word pneuma, which means life or fully alive. But then he uses the word aletheia, spirit and truth. Aletheia, which means nothing hidden. I got 3 ladies in my house right now. My son is off the college. He's back now. You saw him do the welcome. But I've got 3 ladies in my house. I got 2 teenage daughters and then my wife. And how many men can agree with me here? Have you ever taken a picture of your wife or your girls? Not guys, but girls. Have you ever taken a picture? What is the first thing that they ask you to do when you take the picture? What does it say? Can I see it? What's the purpose of seeing the picture? Because they want to take another one. Because the first one, never good. Has it ever been good? Never. In the history of the world, has there ever been. Have you, as a husband, taken a good picture? Now, after you've taken 63 of them, what happens is at the end of that 63rd picture, what do they do next? They get the picture and then they filter it on Instagram, or if they're going to do any social media with it, they go through and they make changes to it. They change the color over here, and they make this manipulate this, and they change this. And if they got a zit over here, they just cover that up. And I mean, my girls are whizzes with being able to manipulate a picture and change it. My daughter took a picture, and there was a rainbow in the middle of the picture, and I said, "Hey, man, that was really cool." She goes, "Yeah, we put that there." I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Look at this picture. This is cool. Filter. And sometimes that's how we come to God. We got to filter this. We got to make sure this is covered up. And instead of coming to God in truth, we come to Him kind of in truth. But see, Jesus overcomes that. Jesus overcomes that. You know what else He does? Jesus, and I mentioned that Jesus gets to the root of the break. He will always get to the root of the break. He's going to always go right to the very thing. Let me say it this way. See, if you really want to take a look at God, you have to risk God taking a look at you. If you want to take a look at God, you have to risk Him taking a look at you. So He says to the woman, He says, woman. Now, first of all, Jesus is the only person that can say that. Okay, He's the only one. So don't try it at home, guys. Okay, I'm just tell you right now. He said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you're right. You don't have a husband. You have well said you have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. And the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly. Finally, we are getting to the no hidden area of your life. Finally, we're able to get to the real issue. Jesus puts His finger right on the issue, which is relationships. This woman had been married 5 different times. Obviously, she had been abused in some way, shape, or form. She had found herself 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, oh my gosh, 5, what in the heck's going on? So I'm not going to get married anymore. I'm giving up on covenant. And so really what's probably going on here is they're both, the man who's the 6th one and her are probably using each other in the situation because she don't want to be in relationship with anybody because she's been hurt so many times. She's been so challenged sometime. And Jesus comes and He puts His finger right on He doesn't deal with symptoms. He's not going to deal with symptoms. He's not going to put a Band-Aid on it. No. He's going to get down into the deep part of who you are, who I am. And He's put His finger right on the very issue. And we don't like it. I'm going to tell you right now, we do not like it. But it's the greatest thing that can ever happen to you because that is the place where you will see God in His true nature. See, the thing I love about John, the writer of the Gospel of John, is that he is able to bring the humanity and the deity together all in one moment. See, in this whole story, what you're experiencing is you're seeing all of His humanity and all of the deity of God mixed in one man, Jesus Christ, who would eventually go to the cross and die for us. And see, here's the thing. See, Jesus sympathizes with us because of His humanity, but He satisfies us because of His deity. And your satisfaction, your overcoming my brokenness. Listen. Yours and my overcoming of brokenness has to do with experiencing Him in deity. When we truly recognize that Jesus is God, you say, no, I believe that. When we get to that place, that's when all that brokenness is reshaped. Okay? Listen to me very closely. Everything about the brokenness is reshaped. And that's exactly why Jesus puts His finger right on the breaking point. Because He wants us to see our brokenness different. We many times see our brokenness as a weakness, and Jesus sees it as a tool to reach people. He shifts our perspective. See, my perspective becomes my reality. Whatever my perspective is going to be my reality. So if I see myself broken, then my life is going to follow after that view. My self-image determines my behavior. So whatever my self-image is, whatever I believe, behavior doesn't change until you change belief. Okay, you can try to spank behavior out of your kids, and it's not going to leave until you find out why. What is the belief that's causing them to make that decision, make that choice? And the greatest thing that God needs us to do as human beings is to believe that we were created in His image. And that even though we've been through broken stuff, so we can see who we are differently. That's why He puts His finger right on the very issue. He puts His finger right on the break. He puts His finger right on, go call your husband. I ain't got no husbands. That's right, you said you ain't got no husband because you have 5. Whoa, oh, that hurt a little bit. Because he's trying to get her to see, listen, you've been searching in the wrong place for satisfaction. You've been thinking that the man is going to medicate your mess. When I'm the one standing right in front of you that cannot medicate it, but can reverse it and change it. I'm the man you've been looking for, is what Jesus is saying. I'm the guy that you've been trying to fix with your marriages. I'm the guy that you've been trying to deal with, and you've been looking everywhere. But I am Him. Because only in me, Jesus is saying this, not me. Jesus is saying, only in me can you truly be satisfied. Look, you can keep going to school, getting an education. You can keep climbing the corporate ladder. You can keep going out with so-and-so and dating so-and-so. You can keep making more money and more money and more money and more money. But that will never satisfy you until you come into contact with Jesus Christ, a God encounter. Never satisfy you. Not only do we see who we are, but we see how we are differently. Part of discovering who I am, listen, is also discovering how I am. My awareness, my behavioral tendencies. I asked myself this question recently: would I enjoy a conversation with me? Would I enjoy spending time with me? You know, would I like to sit down across from me and have a conversation, spend some time with me? Would I be my friend? That's a good question to ask yourself. I was like, oh, Jesus. Because here's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is, do you like you? Do you really like you? And it's important to like yourself. It really is. You say, well, that's selfish. No, no, no. Because you're God's image. You were created in His image. The Spirit of God, if you're a believer, He lives on the inside of you. It's okay to look in the mirror and go, man, you're cute. I like you. I like spending time with you. Because if you don't, you got problems. Because you will always be with you. That's deep, man. I'm telling you right now, that's deep. We also see where we are differently. Where we are differently. We start to see our brokenness not as a pathway of destruction, but as a journey of destiny. We look back over our shoulder and we go, wow, so God really did orchestrate that. Oh, wow, God really did plan that. God, you did that? Oh my gosh, you made that happen? And look at who I am as a result of what happened. And then the last thing that I want to say to you today is that Jesus, listen to this, Jesus makes the broken beautiful.
I guess I didn't really grow up in the best home environment. From a young age, my father dealt with addictions to alcohol and drugs. And I guess by the time I was a senior in high school, 17, 18 years old, my father and I were drinking and using drugs together. By the time I was 20 years old, I was really, really going down a bad path. But then my father attempted suicide for the first time. He attempted suicide 2 more times, and on the 3rd time succeeded. The effect that had on me was very large. It sent me into a very very deep downward spiral in which I did the best I could to not feel the pain, the loss, the anger. Just did everything I could to escape those feelings. Fast forward 5 years after that event, it was 5 years of running, hiding, and numbing myself with substances. Got tangled up with the wrong type of people and got into a physical altercation. And I was very, very under the influence, very inebriated, and the police came, and then I found myself in jail that night. One of the worst things about that night was the fact that there was a national television crew in the jail cell that night filming. Found out a few months after that whole ordeal that it was a nationally aired television show, and that people I know were now seeing it on TV. So after a few years of isolating, I decided to go back to school. And I met a really good friend at school. He was going to Freedom House at the time. I decided to go one Sunday. And when I walked into the doors of Freedom House, I can honestly say it was the first time in my life I had experienced the presence of God. I knew something was different. I had an experience that I had never had before. I was being introduced to a God who loved me, who did not condemn me, who had forgiveness for me, had freedom. And that is not the God that I grew up hearing about or, experiencing. 2 years now I have been at Freedom House Church. A lot has happened in those 2 years, and nothing short of a miracle has taken place in my life. In the last 2 years, I have become an usher here at the church. I serve on the children's ministry. I'm a life group leader, and of course, the best part is I met my beautiful wife. I guess I just want to encourage people out there. Doesn't matter what you've done, where you are in your life, God is there, and His arms are open. And He's a loving God. He's not a God who condemns you. And if you have loved ones who are out there, don't ever give up on them. There is always hope.
I see shattered. See hope. I see broken. You see beautiful. And you're helping me to believe. And you're restoring me piece by piece. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. Wash me in mercy. I am clean. What was dead now lives again.
Jesus does something in this story that he doesn't do much when he's on the planet, the 3.5 years that he's ministering, is he tells the woman that he's the Messiah. He reveals himself to her. He says, I am he. She actually said, hey, Jesus, this Messiah is going to come. He's going to tell me things. He's going to help us. He's going to bring us back together. And Jesus looks at her. And I think there was a look there that when he looked in her eyes and he said, I am he, that she got it. And I think today, some of us in this place, he's here for you. So I want you just to stand up on your feet if you could, just right where you are. And you just need to be cleaned. As Leslie sung, sometimes you just need a fresh touch from God. I can promise you that those are the moments in my life, and it's not just one time. I think we need to have those well moments often. And today is that day, I believe, for you, that God can reshape your brokenness to realize that there's something more for you. There's an ark that you need to build. There's a nation that you need to take. There's a family that needs you. There's a God that forgives you and he loves you. If you could, if that's you, just between you and God, nobody looking around, just between you and God, I need an encounter with Jesus today. I'm going to tell you, he's in this place right now. If that's you, just lift your hands up and God's going to meet you right there. He's going to meet you right where you are. You feel broken today. Maybe you don't like you. Maybe you're in a position where, no, it's not 5 husbands, but it's been 5 jobs or 5 schools, 5 girls or 5 guys. You've been walking to the well trying to hide it, and Jesus is pulling it out of you right now. And Leslie's going to sing that chorus over your life right now as a prayer over you. Just as God just is going to begin to pour his presence over you. The Holy Spirit's going to come and just clean you from the top of your head all the way through. You're going to sense a fresh understanding of who Jesus is. Just sing that, Leslie. Just sing it over.
There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean. There's nothing too dirty. Can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy. I am clean.
Father, thank you so much for just meeting us today in such a powerful way, changing our hearts, God, changing our minds, changing our brokenness from one that makes us feel as if we are damaged goods, but God, let us walk out of this place today understanding that even if we have caused the brokenness, or life, which sometimes just doesn't make any sense, has caused the brokenness, God, you can completely turn this thing around so that we see ourselves in your eyes. That you've called us for such a time as this. In Jesus' name, amen. Can we give God just a big hand clap today?